Namaskar.
So, okay, fine. We are welcoming today's class.
Thank you.
So, this is MPA-12 students. So, ma'am is Professor Jyotirmay Chudu. You are very fortunate. So, ma'am is the associate professor in Jawaharlal Nehru Universities. So, I welcome you, ma'am, from today's class. So,
Thank
students,
you.
I mean, you should fortunate enough. So, ma'am has given time to us to take the your class, the publication class. So thank you very much, ma'am. So for your giving time to Indian National Open University, I welcome you once again, ma'am. Go
Thank
ahead
you.
with your
Thank
class, ma'am.
you. Thank you, sir. So, shall we start?
Yes, ma'am. You can start your class.
Okay, okay. So, in this session, actually, that I am going to take your administrative theory paper. So, in that paper, as if you, I hope you have referred to the IGNO material. So, there are 20 units. So, we have to cover all the units in 8 classes. So, that's why I will be little bit hurry while explaining the concept, the principles relating to public administration. So I recommend that the first thing is that you have to read all the materials first, and along with that you have to go through the references available in the that material itself, so that you would be able to get a comprehensive understanding on the theories of public administration. So, as I hope all of you are aware about that, like other disciplines, public administration do have also its theory, though it is very contested. If you look towards that, so far as specific theories are concerned, that in comparison to other disciplines of social science, so public administration is considered to be a very multidisciplinary discipline in comparison to other discipline. Of course, nowadays we are saying or arguing that most of the disciplines of social sciences are becoming multidisciplinary in nature. But if we consider the case of public administration as a discipline, it is relatively, the degree of multidisciplinarity is much larger in comparison to the discipline like economics, political science, and sociology. Okay, so in that regard, those who are really interested to learn about what public administration is and how actually public administration is really relevant in day to day life, so so they must be ready to learn the multidisciplinary angle associated with the discipline itself. Like sometimes while you start reading public administration, you may think that whether public administration is merely about studying civil service or civil service institution. So that also comes to our mind, because in general parlance, while we are talking about public administration, automatically as a common person we think that public administration is something a civil servant is directly dealing with that. Okay, so that's the concern. But as a discipline, administration is not only confined to a specific vocation like civil service, it is more than that. So that we need to understand. And of course, that while we are going to learn that how far actually public administration is really been able to make us relevant for the today's context, then I will say that definitely the scope of public administration or the prospect of public administration is much broader, and it will make you competitive uh, in as in comparison to other discipline, provided that we should have the capacity to understand that how public administration being a discipline, and also being from the practical point of view, how it will be relevant. So in that regard, basically theory helps us to understand that how actually we need to read a particular discipline. Okay, no doubt in your curriculum there may be the other papers like organizational management, public system management, and your state society public administration. But reading on theory could be, or you reading on theory and also of course the thinkers, both of the papers could be taken as primary paper for any discipline, because both of these papers actually formulates how we need to look towards the discipline itself. And it will also enable us to make a standpoint how we are different from others. Okay, no doubt public administration being a discipline, just now I said that it is multidisciplinary in nature. But still, while we are coming into the context of the discipline specifics, the discipline, the relevance of the discipline itself, so automatically we have to answer this concern that how public administration is different or unique, not just different, unique from other disciplines. Okay, so with this actually I want to begin my lecture with the fundamentals aspect of public administration, like in your first unit, that is the meaning, nature, scope, significance. So all these things are available in your first unit, so I want to begin with that. Then subsequently we'll proceed towards the organization, the understanding of the organization. So in today's lecture I will try to finish this both dimension, that on the one hand we have to have a comprehensive understanding on what constitutes public administration, how being a student how we would be able to define it, then also how we could be able to know the nature, the scope of the discipline, and how actually it is different from the private administration. Because now we are, while we are thinking about public administration, we are trying to locate it, you could say that empirically we are trying to identify it in a particular organization, particularly the bureaucracy. So let me begin with the basics, with the meaning of public administration, or you could say the uh, definitional aspect of the public administration. So I want to show my slide to you. Uh, some of I have presented, I have just prepared for you. Is it visible to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Huh. In this slide actually I have pointed out that okay, if we like suppose if you want to define public administration, so if you just want to be have a very simple understanding, or you could say that ki you are very much to be satisfied or to be contented with a too much being little bit simplistic, then it is very much easy to define what public administration is. Like while beginning with that, of course, so as public administration in a general understanding, it been widely been referred as something which is government in action or government activity, where actually the management of public affairs or the implementation of public policies are being taken place. And also that it includes much more. While we are saying that public administration is something government in action, it is not just merely about the implementation of public policies, or not just merely about the management of public affairs. So, while we are saying that management of public affairs, of course, itself is becoming very difficult to explain what is public. Okay, no doubt, while we are saying implementation of public policies, so we may relatively trying to make a sense. Okay, these are public policies, so government needs to implement that. But while we are saying that it is about the management of public affairs, then automatically if we try to get a very specific understanding out of it, so we need to make a sense what is public, and defining public itself is a very complex task. So that's why it's a very facile definition, so where actually very much accurate and adequacy is not exactly coming. Why? So one kinds of complexity may emerge while explaining what is government in action. So as it informs about multiple dimensions where the role of government found to be visible. So while we are saying the government, that means what we generally understand over here. So while we are trying to understand or locate what would be the definition of a government, so how generally we try to define it? Generally, it begins with that and government is something that who is representing the state, the abstract understanding of the state, and government is something that which is been formed by the people, particularly in a democracy we are believing that government is being formed by the people, and government is for the all. So whatever government does, so that actually meant for public well-being. Okay, but all these kinds of statement essentially not collapsed into, not ending into a very concrete statements. So that's why that it's very difficult to explain that what constitutes government, because it involves multi dimensions. Similarly, another kind of complexities emerge when one counters the words like administration, organization, management, and in public administration, definitely you have to counter the words like that, whether it is about the public administration is the study about the administration, or is it about the management. So if you have gone through the different textbook of public administration, there you will be able to locate that public administration also dealing with the issues of management. So if it is dealing with the issues of management, so automatically questions will evolve that if it is about the management, then why the nomenclature is public administration, why not management? Because we do have also management studies as well. So under that circumstances, those students or those scholars who are actually reading about public administration, researching on public administration, for them the crucial challenge is to make a distinction that how those words actually differs from each other. Then only they would be able to provide a concrete definition towards that what public administration is. So while we are saying administration, so administration generally we found in every places. So it is not merely confined to the public organizations or to the act of civil service only. The administration could be founded in the community, in a society, or also could be founded in any kind of organization. So in that context, administration bears a very generic understanding. The connotation is a very generic one. But while we are attaching the public before the administration, automatically here our concern is surrounding over that how to actually understand what public is. So here I have mentioned that we need to also have a concrete understanding that what constitutes administration and its overlapping characteristics. Like administration is not only thought about in case of public organization, administration is also thought about in case of the private organization and also in the community based organization. So in that context, administration as a concept is very much found to be overlapped with each other in different forms of organization. So here that we need to be very cautious while using that what constitutes administration, what is an organization, what is the management, because these terms are often interchangeably and synonymously used. So that's why there is a complexity in defining what public administration is. No doubt, while we are beginning with public administration, a simple person, a general person may begin with that okay, it is about the government activity. But while we are going towards the government, what constitutes government activity, we need to mention, we need to identify what is administration, what is the nature of administration, so how government is dealing with the public issues, so how the state of management is. So all these questions we need to have explored. So in this context, so to have an elaborative understanding on how one should define public administration, so it needs to be explained first in the form of public and administration independently. So of course that I just have had provided a brief statements, certain brief, I made just brief statements about what is administration is, but now we'll have a an elaborative understanding. So if you go by searching the meaning of what is administration, that it is been derived from Latin word minister, which means to serve. So in its common use, administration is the management, or you could say the proper ordering in the collective activities of human beings. Of course here you are also getting that whether administration is management or management is administration. Okay, but here that while we are saying administration, we need to understand that it is an activity. So here we are getting the simple understanding that it is an activity where the serving matters. Okay, where that serving matters. So then secondly, that there this is a collective activity. Okay, so administration could not be done by only one person. Administration uh, to be done by a teamwork. Okay, so here one person may take the lead, like we are taking the administration of this person. So while we are trying to explain the role of the government, we also try to explain it in terms of a particular kind of regime, that where we are saying okay, the Bush administration, Modi's administration. So here we are actually trying to view that how a particular leader is shaping the group activities of the entire state. Okay, so that is also that here group activities or collective dimension is coming. Then this activities needs to be ordering in a proper manner, or you could say that in a hierarchical or in a priority based manner, that where administration needs to prioritize which work needs to be done, which work needs to be given utmost priority. Okay, no doubt in government administration, every act, every concern relating to public definitely important and non comparable. But suppose if we'll say the case of like the crisis management, the disaster situation. So automatically administration needs to be respond in a more fast manner, or administration needs to be alert always, uh, while countering any kind of disaster. So here, the point is that it is, the administration, the purpose of administration is basically to serve, and it is a collective effort, and the ordering of the work needs to be done so that administration would be able to handle the proper task efficiently. So let's take the some of the definitions, like James Fifner pointed out that administration as the organization and direction of human and material resources to achieve the desired ends. Okay, so while we are saying there is administration, automatically we expect that the personnel must be there, the humans must be there, because they are the agent, or they are the primary primary instruments in carrying out the task of administration. So it cannot be done like in an autopilot mode. So we do need a human, no doubt. In the age of AI, we may think about the autopilot directives, but ultimately it is the human uh, who actually needs to be there to frame, to create the framework that how administration needs to be going on. Then how actually the organization or the direction of the administration needs to be moved on. Then there are also material resources. So material resources means, like, in the form of the space, like while we are saying that administration needs to be functional, so we need certain space like offices, or certain areas where the decision making, that or the plan, how the plan could be taken up to implement the program, could be taken place. So then also that we also need the budget, that how to actually run the concern organization. So that's why Pifner have mentioned about that in administration, the organization and direction of human and material resources being engaged to achieve the desired ends. That means administration has a purpose. So while coming to that public administration as a discipline, and while we are saying it is about the government activity, so automatically that here we also, while we are saying that the public and administration needs to be understood separately, so automatically that here also we need to learn that how actually the from the political science it is whether it is having any kind of distinction, or it is a part of political science. So are you, some of you, have you my I want to know that all of you are having background from political science or from other disciplines.
Other disciplines,
Yes,
ma'am.
yes,
Ma'am,
ma'am. From
other
the
disciplines.
Okay, so any one of you have any degree on political science?
yes, ma'am. A graduation +3.
Okay, so I hope you would be able to understand that
Yes,
while
ma'am.
we are
Yes,
saying
ma'am.
uh, that public administration needs to be studied independently, like while you are reading any textbook, you this is the first questions, this is the first question through by taking which generally the scholars of public administration begins their inquiry, that whether public administration to be studied independently, uh, or it is merely to be studied as per the scope of the political science. Okay, so being a particular discipline, so here definitely the students of public administration must begins with the concern that first they need to justify themselves, that whether they are different from the political science or not. So while they are taking inquiry about the government in action, so how far actually it is not um, how far actually it is escaping the political questions. Because while we are saying that we need to understand the role of public administration in a democracy, so automatically the political angle seem to be very much dominant variable in comparison to the neutral, to the something very much neutral understanding of public administration. Because while we are saying how public administration needs to run, so generally the thought uh, prevails that it needs to be the administration needs to be fair, it needs to be neutral. But here the concern was that while we are studying it in the context of a democratic society, so automatically we do need to justify that whether public administration to be studied independently in comparison with the political science, or it need to be merely taken as a branch of political science. So in that regard, these slides will explain you that the logic that in the broader sense it denotes the work involved in the actual conduct of governmental affairs regardless of the particular branch of the government concerned. So thus we speak administration of justice and or administration of legislative affairs. Okay, so here that while we are trying to make a and distinction that public administration questions are not merely about the political one, or you could say that the question of public administration are always not been shaped by the political angle. So in that context we need to understand that how actually government what would be the actual conduct of government. So while we are saying that the actual conduct of government needs to be fair, so in that regard, if it needs to be fair, if it needs to deliver justice, then in that regard it has to follow the certain rules, and that rules must imbibed with the values of neutrality, that where the case of biasness, where the pressure of the politics would not deviate the purpose of the public administration or the purpose of the government. So government being a political entity and government being an administrative entity, so there is a difference. So while we are saying government is a political entity, automatically we are referring towards that government where people's representation is there. So it is the people who form the government, so their representative will work for them being the part of the government. But while we are saying that in a democracy that some people have not voted for the majority parties, or the parties who have been able to get majority, then in that case government what would be situation, government in a representative form of government, that their case will not be solved. So this dilemma always occur in a democracy. So in order to respond towards that, public administration or the fairness of public administration matters. Because here any laws, any policies, any program, everything, the act of the government is meant for everybody. Okay, is meant for the well-being of the entire nation. So in that regard, that they those people who have not voted, or those who have not supported the majorities who have formed the government, that should not be the basis of their exclusion from getting the government's attention. So in that regard, that administration of the justice or administration of the legislative affairs needs to be done in a fair manner. However, in the narrow sense, it denotes the operation of the particular administrative branch only. So, while we are saying that public administration is different from the political science, so we are here referring to the routinized affair of a particular administrative branch. While looking towards the traditional classification of the government, like we do always trying to classify government in the form of its branches, particularly three noted branches, that is legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. So in that traditional classification of the government also, we found the presence of administration. So you may read about how legislative affair being conducted, how executive is doing its action, how the procedure of judiciary is being initiated. So it will tell you entire act of administration. So it would not tell anything about the political one. So here we need to begin with the paperwork, that okay, that the things needs to be moved on as per the procedure of law. So every, whoever may be the government, whoever the party may be, from the in the at the government, that everybody, irrespective of their party affiliations, they need to follow the certain procedures. And here, while we are sticking to the certain procedures, so automatically the act becoming the administrative one. So in the 19th century, realization was occurred to divide the government into the policy determining or the political branch, and the policy executing or the administrative branch. Okay, that's just like it is an addition to the my previous statement, that in the legislative matters, no doubt that finally it is the domain of the legislature to decide policy, to bring the law. Okay, so but initiating the such process also involves the act of administration. So here, that it is been argued that after over the year 19th century, that the realization have come up that there must be a clear cut demarcation with regard to the government's role in policy formulation and as an implementer. So here, in today's context, we generally refer public administration towards the implementation aspect. Okay, so it has to implement the law, it has to implement the policies, it has to implement the programs. So whatever government desires, public administration needs to implement that. So the function of the former, that means that the policy making power of the government is to lay down the public policy in the form of a statute, executive order, or judicial decree, and that of latter to enforce that policy. So enforcement part, you could say that the enforcement part is exclusively been um, referred as the work of public administration. And whereas, so far as the formulation of the law is concerned, that it is here that the legislative branch needs to done. So thus there arose a dichotomy of politics and administration, and this gave rise to the development of public administration as a separate and distinct subject of study. So as a discipline, one new theme has also added: how to study public administration, which automatically takes our attention to understand it in the form of a discipline. Okay, so while we are trying to define what is public administration, is that here, on the one hand, we need to understand that whether public administration is a branch of study of politics, or public administration is having its own independent area arena of inquiry. So here, that while we are trying to study it as a discipline, while we are trying to understand it as a discipline, I think the latter argument would be taken as the priority task while conducting research in public administration. That means that we need to begin with the understanding that public administration could be studied independently. Okay, no doubt earlier we are not negating that public administration not just being a part of political process, but also there are certain acts, there are certain inquiry where public administration could be studied independently if we want to establish it as a discipline. So, therefore, many dimensions surfaced when one tries to understand what would be the definition of public administration is. So, in that regard, these categories you may found that there is a political component, legal component, managerial component, and occupational component. Okay. So, of course, I have explained to you more about the political one. So the political component, which actually determines the definitions, one way also determines the definition of public administration is that it depicts that public administration cannot exist outside its political context. Okay, so it is this context that makes it public, that makes it different from private or business administration. So of course the any definition of public administration must not ignore its political nature. So there public administration is what government does, and public administration is implementing public interest. Okay, so here once again the dominance of the political one found to be very much uh, persisting in case of the defining the public administration. Okay, so here if you take the statement by Dwight Waldo, so Dwight Waldo was the first to insist that who see administration in terms of its environment. Environment means that here we are referring to the ecology, our surrounding environment. Here I am not talking about the natural environment like forest, trees, mountains, all these things. I am here talking about, suppose if we want to realize how a particular discipline is could be experienced in real life situation, we need to understand its ecology, its surrounding. Like while we are saying the administration of this state or this government or this office is very effective, so then we need to understand the environment of that particular office, the environment of their particular government. So that actually will be able to provide the lens that to understand the differences in administration between different societies, which would be inexplicable if we are limited to viewing administration analytically in terms of universals of administration itself. Okay, so here Dwight Waldo is a scholar who particularly tried to uh, analyze public administration in the context of its environment. No doubt other scholars, the leading scholars were there, like Fredericks. Okay, they have also provided an elaborative understanding how administration to be understood through its environment. But Dwight Waldo was the person who actually focused on that that public administration could not be able to study it independently unless we take into account its surrounding, and of course the surrounding is the political one. So while we are talking about that we need to understand the Indian administration, let's take an example. So we could not be able to understand Indian administration without considering the case of the democracy or the political democracy of India. Like being a youngster, you may preparing for the civil service examination. It may appears to you, okay, UPSC, somebody being a body which is need to be impartial and objective while handling the examination. There is a fair way that in a very objective way the UPSC is conducting examination. But while being recruited into the civil service, the person concerned needs to work in the surrounding of the politics, that to whom the concerned civil servant needs to report. The higher boss is the minister. So that's why, so it is actually the environment which actually creates the situation, particularly in a democracy. The concerned civil servants needs to work with the politician. So that's why the political angle is found to be very much visible while we are trying to define public administration. And Dwight Waldo is one of the supporters of that viewpoint. Then while we are coming to the public interest, so public interest seem to be very much universal in nature. So of course we are considering something as public, that where we believe that it affects all. So in that regard, we cannot also disassociate the role of the political actors who plays a critical role in formulating policies and programs. So public interest is generally taken to mean a commonly accepted good, and where actually the prospect of further policies are also being imbued. And in that regard, if we take the case of public administration, so public administration essentially is that mechanism who actually is responsible to implement uh, the idea of the public interest. No doubt, public interest may have come up in the shape of law, in the shape of policies, in the shape of program, but finally, who needs to deliver it? So it is the public administration. So it can't be delivered by any private party or any single individual. So while we are saying that there is a sanitation issue, there is waste management issue, automatically we are referring to the local agencies who are mandatorily responsible for it. We are not here actually immediately referring to the individuals. We are not referring to any particular community group of members. We are referring to the state. And automatically here, while we are referring to the, okay, this is the government mishandled it, government fails to manage it, automatically we are referring towards the role of public administration. So that's why the public interest, and particularly the surrounding, the environment of the government itself, is a political one, and here public administration is responsible for it. Then now come to the legal definitions, which continues to also dominate in public administration, because while we are reading public administration or dealing with public administration, automatically sense comes, okay, it is about the implementation of law. So whatever law is being given by the state, public administration is bound to implement that. So public administration can say that it will not implement it, because under statute it is been authorized which offices, which authorities will be responsible for implementing it. So that's why it creates that public administration is some the activity where we are being able to get that law is in action. And also of course that here the regulation that the act of public administration is also about the regulate the activities of the particular area on the basis of certain acts, certain statute, where the concerned public officials are authorized to do so. So here, that while we are saying that public administration needs to follow the rules, needs to examine or verify whether all the rules have been properly implemented or not. So in that context, automatically we are getting the viewpoint that public administration is more about implementation of law, or of course such kind of implementation has been viewed with the role of regulation. So here also we are getting a picture that the role of the state as a regulator. Okay, so while if you are reading political science, economics, sociology, so you might have reading about some readings about what is state. So state generally could be viewed as a political agency, or also it could be viewed as a sociological entity. So it is also been viewed as a part of society. So where we are thinking that whose job is to regulate us. Okay, like who is there to regulate us? So in family generally, we thought that our parents, they will traditionally they have the responsibility to regulate us. So if we have, so whatever the conduct we are doing within family or around society, so automatically if we have done something bad, so so they regulate us, no, you are not allowed to do all these things. So automatically their action of regulator is being seen to be visible. Similarly, while coming to the case of the general public or the citizen, so automatically it is the role of the state. No doubt the role of the state is to take care of us, but also at the same time role of the state is to also regulate us, so that it could prevent any kind of violence, any kind of unwanted situation, so that it would be able to bring stability in the society. So then, but here, through whom state will do that? So it is through the public administration. You may take the case of the presence of police, the presence of also the other offices, that who they have given specific responsibilities to do the act of the regulation in order to sustain stability in the society. So all these things are actually taking closer towards to the understanding that public administration is more about the legality, confirming the legal principles. So that's why legal definitions are also dominating the idea of the public administration. Now come to the managerial definition. So I just uh, previously mentioned about, that that public administration also been referred as managerial in nature. Now we are saying that there is also a managerial approach to understand what is the public issue is. So in that regard, actually we are referring to the executive function of the government, that where that whether, no doubt, what would be their pattern, maybe republics or maybe constitutional monarchies. It is government agencies who are responsible to put in practice the legislative act, so that represent the will of the people. Okay, so government over here, or the public administration over here, could not escape from this act, that it will not implement the concerned legislative acts which represents the will of the people. So in that regard, actually the executive action of the government needs to go for the management. Okay, so here, that in management, they have to, some group of persons who are in the, who are working in the executive branch, they have to come with a consensus that how to actually implement the concerned legislative act, the concerned law. So in that regard, they depend on the managerial functions or certain managerial act in order to make their implementation in a smooth manner. So here, that if we consider only the basic understanding of management, which talks about the people responsible for running an organization and to the running process itself, and how actually in that process they are utilizing resources, maybe employees, maybe machines, to accomplish the concerned organizational goals. So here the managers or the persons, the personnel who are into that organization, means that who is responsible to implement that, how actually the purpose of the organization could be achieved. So in that regard actually the management comes into picture. Okay, so the presence of management you may hear found that in everywhere, that in a bureaucratic organization, in school administration, or in also in voluntary organization. But the point here is that here management is being undertaken by some group of persons who are working or who are responsible to implement the concern purpose of the organization. Okay, no doubt that while it is coming to the aspect of the force, the motive of the organization, automatically we may evaluate it in terms of whether the administration is good or bad. So the nature of administration over here, whether good or bad, or effective or not effective, or so in that regard, automatically management coming within that. So here the opinion may be generated that okay, so administration is good because the management within that body is taking the decision or taking the issue seriously. So in that regard, while we are talking about the managers in a government, so we are here actually referring towards the role of the top managers, who are been or also been referred as the political leaders, or also the senior administrative officials uh, in the government, because they are responsible for delivering a particular kind of work which is desired by the state. So they can just say that if there is a crisis, okay, they will not handle it. So they might have gained power by elections, or by is the support of a particular group of community, or by the appointment. Okay, appointment means that in civil services, that the concerned civil servant is getting the designation by appointment. But here, after getting that designation, like you take the case of collector can't say that I will not do this thing. So whatever is been coming under the issue of general administration, the collector has to deal with that. So here, he or she can say that I can do it because I am not been an expert on it. So here, that's why there is a management. Okay, so they have to plan out, they have to clearly lay out that how, if it is the intent of the government, if the government wants to do this thing, if it is the rule, then we need to carry out. So within that actually the role of the management is coming. So managerial definition also continues to dominate the act of public administration, while one trying to get the definitional understanding of the management. Now come to the occupational, which is a very much direct one. As I told you earlier, that while we are saying that public administration, automatically impression comes that okay, it must be the job of civil servants. So that angle we cannot be able to escape, because here we do value that historically public administration is been seen as undertaken by an act by certain staffs or professional, or you could say that a particular group of personnel that who are been recruited for that purpose. Okay, so here we are saying that it is a body of academic and practical knowledge that is applied to the service of society, or here that a system of a standard is been measured, that who are been engaged to serve the needs of society, and also a system of control. By creating an occupation, we are also creating a system of control over the professional practices that regulates the education of new members and maintains both a code of ethics and appropriate sanctions. So here occupational aspect essentially comes to the mind of a general person, while that person trying to understand what public administration is. Um, However, while we are being a scholar and a student, so automatically we have to go by the other three angles, that is the political one, the managerial one, and of course the legal one. Okay, so being a person of academics or being a student, we cannot also set aside the value of the other three one. I think the other three one much more uh, inspire us while we are trying to define what public administration is, rather than just merely occupational. But for a general person who is not a scholar or a student, automatically for him or her, that while saying okay it is about the administration, public administration, then automatically that the statement may come that it is the job of a civil servant. Okay, so that's the concern. So while you are trying to write your answer, I hope all these dimensions you may reflect how they are contributing towards the definitional understanding of public administration as a discipline. And here that public administration amply meets all the three of these criteria, even though unlike law and medicine it cannot control entry into practice through license and examinations. So okay, this is about the summary, that while public administration is not a pure social science as some would have it is fully equal to these more traditional fields of study. um, um, of course, this slide is been created to reflect the duality among the scholars, that whether it could be treated as a part of pure social science, like pure social science means like we are taking the case of your economics, then political science, sociology, history. So these are the disciplines who are being considered as pure social science. Okay, so public administration is being considered as a byproduct of it. So that's why there is a dispute. And of course, still now public administration being a discipline has not yet been able to detach itself from the political science, because in every political science department there is a paper on public administration. And of course there are also independent departments on public administration. But here also we need to learn that no doubt political science people, they are reading about public administration, and public administration people also trying to justify their theoretical grounding, not just borrowing from the ideas of political science, but also from the theories of economics, and also of course from the sociology. So that's why still the two directions are emerging, that on the one hand whether need to be taken it as a multidisciplinary work, where we are saying public administration to be studied independently, where we need to begin with the Woodrow Wilson's argument that the inquiry of administration is different from the political one, because the inquiry of public administration has been decided, it will look into the part of implementation. It will not invest its times in uh, policy formulation, rather implementation. But still, while countering, exploring the implementation dimension itself, also the political things are also being surfaced. Okay, so uh, so we could summarize it that we need to understand it as a discipline, and also as a vocation, and also as a process, and of course that it could be taken as a synonym for word like executive or government. So all these things could be taken into account while we are making the statement that public administration is a government activity, and where such government activity, how that government activity would be, then that question is definitely been answered through as a discipline. Okay, so how that government activity is been conducted, who is the agency responsible for conducting that activity, of course it could be studied as a vocation. Then how that government activity is going on, then it could be studied as a process. Okay, so it may be about the implementation of policies, it may be about the procedures for delivering services or goods. So in that way we would be able to come with a very comprehensive understanding that how, if it is about the government activity, then how that government activity needs to be understood. It needs to be understood as a discipline, or as a vocation, or as a process, or it must be understood as an act of executive. Okay, any doubts till now? Are you all there?
No, ma'am, no doubt.
So with this, actually, if we take into account the definition provided by Philip Negro, and so they are actually, uh, the summation is that it is cooperative group effort in a public setting. Then it covers all three branches of the government: executive, legislative, and judicial, and their interrelationship. Then it has an important role in the formulation of public policy. So that's why it is also a part of political process. Then it is different in significant ways from the private administration, and it is closely associated with numerous private groups and individuals in providing services to the community. So here actually, while we are uh, I think the first three points we have covered elaborately, but so far as the last 2 points are concerned, we have not focused it in a very detailed manner. So, while coming to the fourth one, that it is different significantly from the private administration, it implies that while we are saying administration as a generic concept, that means administration prevails everywhere. Not only it is existing in government organization, it is also existing in also beyond government organizations. Okay, so in that case, the case of private organization is coming into picture. So in private administration, that what actually, how actually we would be able to make a distinction between public and private administration. So in public administration, generally it is to be conducted by a government agency. Okay, it is to be conducted by exclusively by a government agency, whereas in private administration, that here, that it is to be conducted by a particular agency who is been authorized to do a particular act. Okay, maybe company, maybe a particular group of institution who has specific purpose to deal with a specific issue. Okay, so here it is not, in private administration it is not dealing with the administration in generic ways. Then in private administration, the focus, the purpose of private administration is basically to earn profit. Okay, so a private administration cannot compromise the profit of the concerned organization in any way. Whereas, so far as in public administration, the definition of profit itself is very much relative. So here, profit is remains to be secondary in comparison to the well-being of the population. Okay, so government administration here, its intention is to serve the society uh, with the objective that finally the well-being of the society matters. Okay, so if government will lose certain amount of revenue or certain amount of government will go for huge expenditure in order to protect the rights of the individual or a particular community members, so in that regard government will not calculate it on the basis of profit or loss of the government revenue. So in that regard, the purpose of the government administration or the public administration is the well-being, uh, defined with the attached with the well-being, understanding well-being of the concerned citizen. Whereas private administration, its purpose is to anyhow it has to maximize the profit and at least to retain the profit. Then the political angle also makes a distinction between private administration and public administration. So so far as public administration is concerned, that here the scope of political intervention continues to be the dominant in comparison to the private administration. Okay, so here that the decision being taken by public administration essentially needs to be influenced by the political process, whereas the private administration here is been exclusively the decisions which it is been exclusively taken into account in comparison with the matter of technicalities and also the cost benefit analysis. So that's why in that regard they are different from each other, but they do also have similarities with regard to the techniques, with regard to the necessity of the human resources, materials. um, they also go for budget, while also the public organization also go for budget. So they also follow the management techniques income. So in that regard they share certain commonalities. And while coming to the last one, that public administration is closely also associated with numerous private groups and individuals in providing service to the communities. So here that we are essentially looking towards the act of the public administration being a government activity, that how actually it has also been taken into account the role of the community groups, the role of the private groups, because nowadays that what presently what we have till now what we have discussed, that public administration is about the government activity. Okay, however, in contemporary context, that if we observe that how the service delivery is going on, how actually the um, mm, uh, the different players have emerged, the different actors have emerged towards the service delivery. So here we need to also extend or get an extensive understanding that public administration is not exclusively been monopolized by government activity only. So whatever public administration, no doubt traditionally we are trying to understand that it is about the government activity. So earlier that this government here, no doubt it is government activity, and government continues to be the sole agency to provide everything, to provide goods and services. It is not just only the decision maker, it is also the implementer. But now actually we are getting a transformation, you could say, that towards the definitional understanding about public administration being just a government activity. So here no doubt government activity begins with providing regulation that how service needs to be delivered. But so far as the delivery agent is concerned, that it is not essentially the public organization always. So it also the private organization, it also the communities. Okay, now take like suppose implementation of that your right to education act. Okay, so in implementation of right to education act, government has provided already the mandate. The concerned school and education department, mass education department is already there, that to provide regulations that how each of the school which are coming within its jurisdiction, that how they would be able to implement the right to education act within their school. So it may be a private school or it may be a government school, but they have to implement it because it is the mandate of the state. So here the nodal agency to provide that direction is the school and mass education department. And here it is providing the all the regulations are equally applicable to irrespective of the nature of that school. It may be a private school or it may be a government school or it may be a semi government school or it may be a school run by minority educational trust. So whatever it may be, but after all of their the nature of creation, they have to follow the guidelines of the government while implementing the act, and they are bound to implement the act because here government finally wants to implement the act in the purpose of the public welfare. Okay, so that's why no doubt nowadays what we are observing, no doubt private groups and community based organization, non governmental organization, they have now engaged in the process of service delivery. And they are that now they are helping the government, helping the public administration in facilitating the act of the government. So you could say that public administration is about the government activity where we observe the role of various agencies. Okay, who, government, non-government, or the presence of public and the private. Okay, no doubt their nature of creation may be different, but while implementing the purpose of the government, they have to abide by the regulations of the government. Okay. So, in sum, public administration is the non political public bureaucracy operating in a political system. That is the neutral definition, that what we are saying. And it deals with the ends of the state. Okay, the sovereign will, that which just I have explained while explaining that how the nature of creation of a particular organization may be different, but while it is coming within the jurisdiction of a particular state, it has to implement the law, it has to obey the law to keep in view the public interest and the laws. So it is the business side of the government and as such concerned with the policy execution, but it is also concerned with the policy making. And of course it covers all three branches of the government, although it tends to be concentrated in the executive branch. So executive, the role of the executive branch seem to be much dominant while we are trying to get the definition of public administration, while we are trying to get what public administration is doing. So automatically our attention is more on the part of the public administration in the executive branch. Okay, so these are all about the definitional aspects. Now come to the nature of public administration. So generally, nature of public administration is been broadly divided as integral and managerial. So while we are saying that the integral aspect of the public administration, so it is conceived in a comprehensive sense to include all the activities of the government. Okay, let me finish about the managerial aspect, then you will be able to understand what is the integral one. So while we are talking about the managerial aspect of the public administration, it is actually concentrated with the activities of the executive branch. Okay, so the executive branch, uh, which has been concerned as the leading branch, while taking into account uh, the nature of public administration. So here we have came with the understanding that public administration is supposed to implement the law. So the job of public administration is not to formulate the policy, that is the secondary one, but also that the primary one is to implement the law. So this implementation of law, or you could say that the implementation of policies or program, actually pushes public administration to becomes uh, management centric. Okay, so there the executive branch is responsible to provide the detailed routinized act of the government. Okay, so like take the example of the ministries. So if we go by the structural format of the government, we have PMO, and also we have also cabinet, then also we have the secretariat. So there where that we are getting the structure, the ministers are there, then under them the departmental heads are there. Okay, so here that whatever program is been implemented by a particular ministry, so if you verify, if you go by the each of the directory of the ministry or the department, you will get the sense that what kind of task they are dealing with. So they have to implement the mandated task assigned to them um, in a routinized manner. So in order to implement the mandated task, so they are also they have formed a group of committees on the basis of hierarchy. So at the apex level, that the person who are been engaged with that how a particular policy or a particular program will be implemented, then you would be able to understand that how they have designed it so far as implementation arrangement is concerned. And such implementation arrangement needs to be confirmed with the concerned law or concerned program. So here that while designing that the implementation arrangement, so the act of the senior officials becomes managerial. Okay, so such act will not be uh, found to be carried out at the grassroots level. So at the grassroots level, they are only have to implement the command given by the higher organization or the organization which is at the highest level. So in that regard, the managerial role of the public administration found to be at the actually executive branch, which generally located at the apex level. So there only few persons are involved. So it is not managerial act of public administration, essentially not referred to the mass activities of the civil servants or the mass activities of the people who are engaged in the process of service delivery or the implementation of that law. Rather, it is an act is been confined to the highest ladder of the government, and that here we are getting only small group of people who have been invested with the authority to implement or responsible as a whole to enforce that law in the entire state. Okay, but while we are coming to the integral nature of the public administration, so here public administration is basically including all the spheres of the government, like legislative, executive, and judicial branch of the government. And here, that any act, so you could say that the managerial act of the public administration could be included in the integral nature of public administration. So here that it is not just about the senior officials, it is also about the field officials, how field officials are implementing a particular program, how actually field officials are trying to implement or enforce a particular law. So all these things are coming under the integral aspect of the public administration. So the integral viewpoint can be, you could be able to locate it in the writings of L.D. White, Woodrow Wilson, John Pfiffner, then Marcel Dumas, while the managerial view could be found in the definition of Luther Gulick, Henry File. Actually, Luther Gulick and Henry File, they actually have exclusively elaborated that the relationship with the principles of organization, particularly, and in that principles of organizations they have explained that how actually the relationship between organization and management uh, found to be very much interlinked while we are trying to study the scope of public administration or the nature of public administration. And their actually their writings subsequently led towards the creation of one of the understanding that public administration is study about the management. Okay, so because they have focused more details into the principles of uh, managerial principles of public administration, like you could say that organizing, staffing, planning, all these things. However, if you go by the writings of Woodrow Wilson and L.D. White, you will get the direction that they wanted to just focus on the questions that whether public administration is about the study of uh, public sorry implement enforcement aspect of law or public policy. So in that regard, most of the writings of Woodrow Wilson and L.D. White have focused into that how far actually public administration being as an act has been able to focused into the concern with only merely with the enforcement of public policy or enforcement of law. Okay, so within that actually the managerial definition definitely been reflected. So these are all about the nature of public administration. And while we are coming to the scope of public administration, once again you may classify it the comprehensive nature of its scope or the managerial direction of its scope, or also you could make it in the form of whether public administration as an activity or public administration as a discipline. So while we are saying public administration as an activity, so we have to understand that the definitional aspect, that how actually mm, as an activity or particularly being a government activity, how it has been understood and pursued. But while we are coming to the public administration as a discipline, so we need to take into account the subject matter view and the postcorp. So postcorp basically here it is talking about the principles of organization, that the planning, organizing, staffing, direction, coordination, all these things are coming over here. Then budgeting. So here that principle each of the principle needs to be studied or how those principle found to be reflected in the organizational framework, and that needs to be examined. Similarly, while coming to the subject matter of view, that how actually public administration as a discipline being pursued widely by democratic countries and by the countries having authoritarian regimes, or or theocratic regimes like Islamic states. So, how actually in that particular state public administration as a discipline has been flourished, whether they have gone by establishing independent centers of research, uh, or being considering it as a subject in the university, or or government is creating new think tank for to uh, study public administration as per the state needs. Okay, because being a India being a democratic state, we are trying to study public administration basically through the lens of democracy. So while studying Indian administration, we won't be able to uh, um, detach ourselves from the process of the democracy, the concept of democracy. But suppose imagine the case of the state of Pakistan, imagine the case of the state of um, uh, um, Iran. So they are the study of public administration, or the its patronage by the concerned state needs to be also taken into account while we are trying to study the subject matter view. In fact, subject matter view of public administration provides the scope to make public administration more comparative and transcendental in nature. Okay, so here we are not just looking out how public administration being a discipline has been expanded in different kinds of democracies like India, US, or Britain, Australia. Similarly, that if we want to take the regimes like those regimes where their dictators still they are ruling or continuing as the head of the state. So how actually public the content of public administration is being shaped over there. So it provides the scope uh, to study public administration in a more transcendental manner, rather than just in a um, uh, microscopic manner, like as we are trying to study particular public administration in a particular state. Okay, so these are about your scope of the subject sorry scope relating to the public administration. Any doubt till now? Hello?
No, ma'am. No.
No doubts. Huh? Okay, so now we'll switch over to the organization aspect, which is in your unit 2. So, while going towards the organization, so one thing I want to let you clear that see, studies on organization is not just confined to the public administration only. Studies on organization has been followed by uh, across all the social science disciplines. It may be political science, or it may be sociology, or also management, and also anthropology. So so particularly, it is actually the sociology and political science who continues to dominate so far as studies on organization are concerned, and of course the management. Uh, but so far as the nature of the organizations are concerned, like in political science, we do read about various political institutions, and how those organizations are actually been shaping their nature, or functionalities, uh, due to their interaction with the society, the other forms of organization. Similarly, while we are going towards the sociology, essentially, that the assumption comes with that every kind of organization prevails in the society. Basically, that could be studied by through the lens of sociology. Okay, but while we are coming into the public administration, essentially here we are reading about public bureaucracy, and particularly we are trying to locate bureaucracy in different forms of organization. So no doubt, we may suppose we'll begin with the definition of the Max Weber, that how bureaucracy needs to be. So Max Weber is not saying that bureaucracy is about uh, the bureaucracy is about only that public administration. People need to define it. Okay, so if you read Max Weber, that you will get the understanding that bureaucracy as a form of organization been considered to be social in nature rather than just political or any technical one. Okay, so that's why in sociology Max Weber is been referred as the classical thinker, one of the classical thinkers to study the form of organization. So here, that being a student of public administration, we need to have a cautious approach towards reading that how organization we need to study. So here, we need to begin with that public administration. While we are saying that, no doubt we have said that it is about the government activity, uh, and but how this government activity uh, has been manifested. Okay, so if we try to search that question, we would be able to get the answer that this this government activity has been or could be manifested through a particular kind of organization. Okay, so while we are saying okay, government activity is being conducted, that means that here we are looking forward towards the role of some group of individual, and those group of individuals has been mandated by a particular agency. So we are here trying to get their presence before us through the uh, through the nomenclature of a particular agency. So that actually enables us to look at uh, the angle that how actually organization shapes the um, content of the public administration. So here, that while we are saying that organization in public administration, essentially, no doubt in your curriculum that it has been mentioned in the form of formal, informal organization, and there also we are getting the line based organization, staff based organization, auxiliary organization. So but overall, organizations are basically, or organization is particularly in traditional way in the discipline of public administration has been considered to be one of the principles of public administration. So if you have a reading on principles of public administration, so we do have certain classical principles like hierarchy, unity of command, span of control. Then subsequently we do have also certain managerial management centered principles like planning, budgeting, staffing, organizing. So organization here actually comes into picture, that it is an entity who actually has the capacity to imbibe, or not just imbibe, capacity to include all other principles into its fold. So you may talk about the hierarchy, you may talk about the span of control, you may talk about the unity of command, you may talk about the centralization and decentralization, you may talk about the budget, you may talk about the staffing. So everything you will or their presence you won't be able to get without the presence of an organization. So you could say that organization being considered as a principle, it is something is a very comprehensive in scope, because while studying organization you would be able to also learn about the other principles of public administration. No doubt, while we are reading hierarchy, suppose we'll begin with hierarchy. So here that the presence of hierarchy also we are trying to look at it in the form of organization. Like if you take family as an organization, if you take office as an organization. So here that in family also we are getting hierarchy. We are getting the sense that okay, we are following this hierarchy because in family condition the arrangement such kind of that some persons are senior, some persons are junior, and in a family that as we are born out of our parents, so they are our elders, so we have to obey them. So there is a kind of hierarchy. We are thinking that okay, it is very much acceptable and logical. But while we are saying going towards a office based organization, we are getting hierarchy in the form of um, that legal rational authority. So irrespective of the nature of variations with relating to hierarchy, but the organization is persisting. So here the concern comes that being a student of public administration, how do actually we need to begin with a sound understanding of higher, sorry, organization. So for that, actually, I have also prepared this. Is it visible? Is it visible to you? Hello? Is it visible? Are you all there or not?
No,
No, ma'am,
ma'am.
not visible. Not visible, ma'am.
Why it is not showing? I don't know actually why actually it is not showing. Hmm. Anyway, leave it. I'll show you in the next class. Uh, Still, it is not showing. So here two crucial things you need to remember, that one is that while studying organization, so it is not exclusively the domain of public administration. The other disciplines are very much into it in explaining that what organization is and how organizations are functioning. So in that regard, we could make a distinction, or we could make a departure from the other discipline while studying organization by focusing our questions on reading about the public organization, particularly the bureaucracy. So here, if you, I have gone through your content. So if you if you are having reading on your content, so you will get one way to analyze the organizations like formal and informal, and another is your line agency, staff agency, and auxiliary agency. And here uh, we need to discuss in these two ways. So while we are going towards the formal and informal way to understand the organization, so as I told you, that organization being a principle of public administration, so it is, its scope is very comprehensive, its area is very comprehensive, because it reflects the role of the functionalities of the other principles of organization, maybe hierarchy, maybe unity of command, or any principle you may take. Okay, so you would be able to get the presence of the different principles in while studying organization. It may be hierarchy, or it may be centralization, decentralization, or it may be planning, budgeting, staffing, all these things. Okay, and while coming to the formal and informal organization, so basically it is the nature of creation which is making distinction between what constitutes to be a formal or an informal organization. Okay, like take into account the case of uh, like you could say that in your village or in your locality, some people, the elder people or the like-minded people, they gather together, they discuss issues of common affairs together uh, in a meeting. But essentially those meetings have not essentially been created out of any kind of law. Like take the case of gram sabha. So gram sabha is something which is been to be conducted as for the mandates of the concerned Gram Panchayat Act. So we cannot say that Gram Sabha is basically a non informal organization. So Gram Sabha, of course, because as it is created out of or mandated by law, so that's why it is a formal organization. But suppose in Gram Sabha, we are the, suppose you could say that the people who are sitting in the Gram Sabha known to each other, they share a bondage, they share a certain level of commonality because they belong to same space, and they you could say that some of your friends, colleagues may be in the Gram Sabha. So here also you are taking a some kind of informality interactions with them. So that's why, so it is actually the nature of creation, that how actually we could be able to distinguish between a formal and informal organization. So while coming to formal organization, formal organizations are actually a necessity to make state functional. Even you could say that if state is the government is the representative of the state, so government is also a form of organization. So here suppose we are trying to view government in the form of the different kinds of organizations or branches, like what we had just discussed, the legislature, executive, judiciary. So So those organizations who are representing those branches, so they are also been created out of a particular mandate of the government, a particular law. So so automatically they labeled the uh, nomenclature that they are the formal organization, and the necessity of this formal organization is a requirement, because here we cannot imagine the orderly functionality of the government without the presence of formal organization. So informal organization may be created, may be a part of a product of the emerging emotions. Okay, suppose we want to decide something, so like-minded people, they sit together and trying to get a common resolution to act further. But in a formal organization, it the personnel, they may want or they may not want, but they have to abide by the rules of the formal organization. They have to follow the patterns, they have to read the or understand the law, and they have to also abide by the decision taken by the concerned organization. So so here, that in formal organization we are getting a set of rules, so it can't act without a set of rules, and these rules are essentially codified in nature. Okay, so it's not like that ki verbally the things will be conducted. So if they have to decide something, so they have to follow the existing guidelines which is already been given by the government. Like suppose we could say the concerned finance department has to take a decision, but the concerned finance department will not take any kind of decision without referring to the finance rules or the finance manual for the particular state and the government. So while coming with a decision about any kind of emerging situation, so they have to justify their action as per the existing financial rules, because they are formal organization, and it is mandated upon the formal organization, they have to comply the legalities. So formal organization, one way you could say that they are created out of the legalities, and they are mandated to enforce the legal norms, the legal principles in their everyday act of life. Okay, then secondly, formal organizations also do have a certain kind of structure. The structure, suppose we are saying the university, the college, the secretariat, so how could we would be able to identify them? So it is not just existing in our mind. Okay, so it needs to be seen, it needs to be visible. So such kind of organizations have a very well built infrastructural structure, and here we are observing a particular kind of location where the concerned structure is being created, and here we are observing that some group of individual, they are sitting there, have been given with the authority to implement the act of the concerned agency or the organization. So the structural aspect is a very essential aspect without which we can discuss about the formal organization. Okay, one is the legal aspect, another one is the structural aspect. So here the structure itself creates the legitimacy that okay, this organization is functioning. So it mandates that it legitimizes that the functionality of the concerned organization. And of course, that what I told you earlier, that organization as a principle in the context of formal organization, the other principles of organizations found to be reflected and dominantly found to be in a very expressive form in comparison to the informal organization. Like you take the example of budgeting as a process in the organization. See, budgeting as a process in the organization, it generally to be conducted annually. So it is an official task where each the concerned organization is supposed to create the budget for the coming years, and it needs to be approved by the concerned the highest authority. And here that it is a mandated function of the organization. If it will not be done, then the salaries of the staff, the administrative act of the concerned organization, and the implementation cost of the program would not be a possibility. But in case of an informal organization, here that what we are getting, budget budget may be it may be, it is basically an optional process. Okay, and here they are, it depends on the member whether they they will go for a budgeting or not. It is purely optional in nature. And the another point is that the formal organizations are basically runs out of the public money. Okay, but informal organizations are essentially not run by the public money. Many times, informal organizations are being run by the voluntary contributions of the members. But so far as formal organizations are concerned, that here, as there is a designated budget, and so that's why that government is responsible to allocate a specific grant to the concerned organization as per the demand made in the budget. So that's why that which justify the act of the concerned organization. And the mandate of the formal organization must reflect the mandate of the state, whereas informal organization may not. That is also optional. Okay, so and finally the public accountability dimension is also found to be reflected in the case of uh, formal organization, whereas in informal organization the public accountability dimension found to be lacked. So these are certain fundamental criteria through which you could make a distinction between what is a formal organization and what is an informal organization. And so far as while we are studying about the formal organization, so basically the role of public administration is concentrating its attention on the role of public bureaucracy, or the role of those agencies who are responsible to implement the act of the government. It may be a government organ, exclusively government organization. It may be exclusively a independent regulatory agencies, or it may be certain kinds of auxiliary agencies who are helping to provide support to the main agencies, line agencies, to implement the law. So in that regard you would be able to make a distinction. So while coming to the the other classifications, like we may get a sense of your line agencies, staff agencies, and auxiliary agencies. In fact, the line agencies are continues to be the main agencies to implement the purpose of public administration in comparison to the other agencies. Uh, so here, line agencies may be classified as departments, ministries, then your independent regulatory agencies, like um, we do have different regulators nowadays, like SEBI, then your insurance regulatory, uh, development agencies. Then your another one is the telecom authority, telecom regulatory tribe. So so ministries, departments, then uh, independent regulatory agencies, all of them are coming under the line agencies. So line agencies basically means what? Hmm? Line agencies means, any guess? Are you listening to me? Are you still there?
Yes, ma'am.
So line agencies means what? Be labeled as line agency. Line agencies are those agencies who are considered to be an expert in implementing the particular area or particular policies. Okay, like you take the health department, you take the case of health department, you take the case of engineering department. So they, why those departments? Because they are having the expertise to deal with that particular issue. So the issue of health department can be dealt by the revenue department. So here a particular form of organization has been created and particular task has been mandated to them to implement the or to govern the issues relating to a specialized issue. And in that process, the general administration will help them. Like you take the office of the collector. Office of the collector is basically that kind of structure who not only need to, basically it act as staff agency. So here that it has to implement all the concerns of the both line and general issues of general administration. Okay, so here we are getting that those organizations who are being referred as an expert in dealing with a particular subject. Okay, that this subject is coming from, of course, from your state list, that we do have a if you read the federal structure of the India, that we do have three lists: the union list, state list, and concurrent list. And so far as implementation aspect is concerned, state government is responsible for most of the implementation part. So accordingly, the departments or the ministries has been created in order to provide clarity that who will implement what. Okay, so you please have a reading on the three central list and how actually the departments, the ministries, they have created in order to provide a concrete direction towards the specific list. Okay, so with this we'll also discuss further in the subsequent classes. So with this I am ending, and if you have any kind of queries, you may please ask. You have any queries?
Ma'am, next class, which chapter will be studied? Ma'am,
What?
next class, which unit? I was asking.
Your question? We are now at the
Yes, ma'am. Second unit.
second
Yes, ma'am.
unit. A little bit discussion about second unit further. Okay.
Okay,
So,
ma'am.
so I think next class will be on. It is not. It is in the Tuesday, I think.
Yes, ma'am. Tuesday. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay then. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.